Hi everyone, welcome back to another video of Global Career Scholarship. As requested by my international follower, this time I'm going to share my interview experience in English. Before I jump into the main contents of the video today, I would like to acknowledge that interview can be a nightmare to many applicants applying for scholarships. Based on my mentoring experience, some applicants who have already passed the first round, and then because of the interview, they are disqualified and not being chosen and recommended to an IIAD for the second round. So it's very important to not only be good at writing, but also expressing your opinion, expressing yourself, and in order to attract the attention and convince the selection committee that you deserve the scholarship. So just to give you a little bit of background, back then in 2019, I applied through the embassy track. And then after, I think, 7 days or 10 days of the submission deadline, some applicants were invited for the interview. I remember that there were 15 applicants who were invited for the interview. And then there were 6, among which one was a reserve candidate. Because the quota of Cambodia through the embassy track at that year was 5 applicants. Not sure if it's relevant, but 2 applicants were from the science and engineering background, and the other 3 were from social science background. And I hope the experience that I'll be sharing today will be somewhat beneficial when it comes to your own interview. For the embassy track, 5 applicants were invited at a time into a room with 3 selection committee, and 2 of them were Korean, and another one was from the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport, who is a local Cambodian. Right, let's get into the main content together. Well, as any interview, the first question that would come would be self-introduction. And if you have experience applying for work or an internship, probably you have some sort of idea of how it should look like. But for me, as an applicant, self-introduction is the most important part in which you draw or do not draw the attention of the selection committee. As you can see my note here, I noted that this is where you should make a statement that stands out from the rest. So it's important that you start very strong. But first off, I think you need to understand that going for a scholarship interview, mostly they just want to know yourself in detail. They just want to know yourself further, which means a lot of information that you've already mentioned in your statement of purpose or personal statement would not be so interesting to bring it up again to the selection committee. And I'm going to give you an idea of how I answered such questions. Well, I started by introducing my name and the school I was going to, the degree I was taking. Just to give you an idea, I have not graduated yet back then. And I briefly described the project that is somewhat social entrepreneurial project that I was working with my teammates. And I briefly explained how it helps the society and the community that it was intended for. And lastly, I was telling the selection committee my 5-year from now goal. Just so you know, I did not mention the project that I was working with my teammate in my personal statement or statement of purpose, but it is somewhat relevant to the major that I was applying for, which was energy and electrical engineering, specialized in renewable energy. So you can see here, most of the students would probably go and describing their family, and some people would bring up their achievements, which I don't think is bad at all. And some people would bring up their own GPA and the grade ranking that they've obtained. But again, as you may be aware, that I applied with a 2.7 GPA. So I could not bring up such things to tell the selection committee. So I was thinking of something that would make me stand out from the other applicants. And that was the project that I was working with my teammates. If I'm not mistaken, I mentioned that I was a full-time engineering student while working part-time as an English teacher. So you might see that there are lots of points here, but please be aware that you are not in the room alone. There are 4 other candidates waiting to answer the same questions. So you need to be mindful about the time and make sure that you can briefly touch the points that you want to include in self-introduction. Do not make it too long, but at the same time, do not make it too short and do not include unnecessary information. Next, the second question was that they asked us to use any adjectives that describe us as a person. Personally, I think it's an interesting question. You can see from my notes here, when someone asks you to describe yourself as a person, it doesn't have to be you describing yourself, but it can be other people describing who you are. It can be your family, it can be your friends. it's also important that you are not just throwing any adjective and then not explaining, not elaborating by giving examples. It was an interesting question because I got to go in detail about my life story by using adjective to describe myself, and at the same time using adjectives that my friend would describe me as a friend, as a person. For example, I use the word perseverant. I've got 3 older brothers and 1 younger sister, and only my 3rd brother who graduated from university. And none have graduated from master's degree yet. So I touched upon a little bit of my story growing up. It's been challenging for me to even go to school, that I had to work while undertaking a full-time engineering degree. And I told them, look, I'm graduating now. This has shown how perseverant I am. And my dream is to pursue a study abroad. And being courageous in applying for this scholarship shows how perseverant person I am to chase my dream. Okay, next. I think this question would appear in any scholarship interview. They would want to know how you would deal with problems while living away from your family, while living abroad alone, right? So the question would be, what do you think will be hard, difficult while living in Korea, and how will you overcome it? Well, I would suggest that you can talk about your experiences living abroad if you have, or going for conferences abroad, exchange programs, or you can talk about your experience learning new languages or participating in any events and in any cultural events that shape you as an open-minded person, that helps you adapt in a new environment very quickly. For me, I think the good thing I did here was that I acknowledged that moving alone for 3 years to a new country, not knowing the language, is hard. I did acknowledge that. But then I raised examples of how I survived going through an engineering degree, taking science exams in French and in English, and they're not my native languages. I persevered for 5 years and I'm graduating now. And I don't think learning another language would be a challenge for me. For example, food. Food would be a challenge for many students. And for me, I know how to cook. And just to give you an idea, I have not said that during my interview, but if you are somewhat an introvert like me, you would probably find it difficult maintaining the conversation or communicating with people. So for me, I would use cooking as a way to build relationship with my international friends. Let's say I would cook every weekend and would invite my international friends to come, and that's how I overcome my introvertness. So really, it can be anything, but make sure that when you answer, please come up with an illustration through your experience of how you already overcame such problem, and you are going to make it again. I remember I also mentioned that I've been to a few countries, and those were for educational purposes, even though it was within a short time. But I learned to open, to receive, and to listen, and to adapt into a new environment that I've not experienced growing up. So please remember that most of the times you would probably want to prove to the selection committee that you will overcome, but sometimes we need to be vulnerable in a way that we accept that it's difficult, but we are going to make it. I hope you get what I mean. This is the last question, but before this last question, 2 applicants were asked with follow-up questions regarding to what they did, and one of those 2 applicants was me, and both of us were recommended by our embassy to NIIAD. So you can see here how powerful the starting point, the self-introduction is, and because of the self-introduction, you've been asked follow-up questions. So make sure that you bring up something that is special, bring up something that is relevant, and bring up something that is interesting and that would give you an edge comparing to other applicants. This last question is interesting, but at the same time, it can be a nightmare. This is the question that you need to again prove yourself that you deserve the scholarship, that you deserve to be chosen over other applicants. As you can see my notes here, this is the trickiest part, which can either add credit to what you have been performing, or it could grade you. So just to give you an idea of how I answered this question, I started by asking the selection committee. Just to give you an idea again, Cambodia is based on hydropower to produce electricity. And in 2019, back then, there was a problem with drought. We didn't have enough water, so that led to the lack of electricity supply, even to people in the capital city. So I asked the selection committee, how do you feel living in the capital city of Cambodia, but then not having enough electricity supply? And I told them, I do acknowledge that yes, it's because of climate change. But then at the same time, we have a lot of resources. Sun, we can make it as solar power, solar energy. We have to acknowledge we lack the technical know-how on renewable energy technologies. And I told them that's why it requires a student like me to go to a country like Korea that are now prioritizing renewable energy. Their governments are setting targets to integrate renewable energy into their electricity mix, to go and gain knowledge, technical knowledge from the professionals, from experts in the field, and come back to develop the renewable energy sector in Cambodia. So this is how I answered, basically to convince them once again before we leave the room that I deserve, and I really deserve, to get this scholarship because Cambodia needs this specific sector needs me, and I am passionate in solving the problems and in developing such sector. All right, I think this is simple, but I was not asked this question during the interview, but I did prepare for this as well. So it's a common question, but it's important that you know how to briefly explain and make sure that you're not throwing any technical words to them. Make sure that you're providing anything general and put yourself in the shoe of a non-technical person. The selection committee might not be from the same background as you. So briefly give them an idea and simply guide them through what you want to do. And again, as I've already given tips in the statement of purpose video, I would encourage you to separate the plans into short-term and long-term plans. And please briefly explain them on what you plan to do and contribute, and how will it help you achieve your career aspirations. And one thing most of the applicants would ask, is it okay if I want to work in Korea? Is it good that I mentioned working in Korea in this future plan? There's no problem with this. For the Korean government scholarship applicants or students, we are somewhat being encouraged to work in Korea. Well, in any scholarships, they would also want to see you come back and bring your knowledge to develop what you have written in your future plan, your statement of purpose. But really, at the end of the day, no one is going to check if you are doing it or not. Probably like me, I wanted to work in Korea, but then after 3 years in Korea, I felt like Korea is not for me. So you might change your mind, and that's okay. All right, number 6, what is your intended major and why Korea, not other country? I think it's something that we already write in our statement of purpose and personal statement as well. But here again, please do not be technical. Just remember that those selection committee members are not from your same background, and they might not understand what you are saying if it's too technical. So just to give you an idea, as you can see in the notes here, you might want to link your major towards what Korea has to give, has to offer, and what specific field Korea prioritizes. You want to study specific major, and then in Korea. Why is that? Because of an advanced development in the field? Is that because Korea is advanced in such major? Or is that because of the Korean government prioritizes your major, so that they provide funding to develop this field and to do research in this particular field? Or is that something else? Or next, this is a very interesting, very, very interesting question. I got this question from one of my mentees, and they asked, what would you do if you got $1 million? And to me, if I was asked such question, it would come back to my roots, to my major, to the sector that I would love to work in. And that's the energy sector. And I would invest in the energy sector. Probably I would say because lots of people in the distant areas of Cambodia do not have access to electricity yet. So probably investing in the transmission line or developing national grids so that electricity could be accessed by everyone, everywhere in Cambodia. And I would probably give the benefits by doing such investment, probably giving people jobs, skills and trainings, capacity buildings, and helping people better their standard of living, and many more. So it really requires you to really understand what's happening in your sector, in your field, so that you can have some sort of idea of how to answer when it comes to such questions, and questions that you do not even expect to appear during the scholarship interview. All right, just to give you a little bit of tips before this video ends, it's important that you go back to your writing, your application. Probably you might forget some of the points that you mentioned in your writing, in your application, because it can be quite a long time after you submitted your application. So just go back and note down the important elements of your application. And again, I mentioned a few times in this video, it's important to make a great impression, a good impression, and with great impression, showing them that you are ready and you are up for the challenge, and you have purpose, and you know what you want to do when you return back to your home country. It's important to know what a good response is like as well. And you would probably need someone who might go through this experience to listen to your responses. Probably you might think, oh, your response is good, but from other people's perspectives, they might not be so great. And again, you won't be in the interview room alone. You will be with other applicants, so be mindful, and it's important to be specific. I might give you some idea, lots of points, but make sure that you know how to tackle those points effectively, considering the time limit. Well, there is no time limit, but considering that other applicants are waiting to respond to the same question. But make sure that you give your best shot too. And last but not least, it might sound cliche, but practice, practice, practice. It's important to practice. You can either practice with people, practice in front of the mirror. It can be anything. Make sure that you are ready before the interview day and you're going to nail the interview. Today's video comes to an end, and I hope the tips and the experience and the idea that I've been sharing throughout this video are beneficial for your upcoming interview for the scholarship. And thank you very much for watching. Until the next video, please stay safe. Bye-bye.